Thanks for staying with us. So on this segment, we shall continue to discuss the nationwide protest with our attention on the FCT, Kano and Kaduna, where the protest is reportedly going south. Joining us right now is the former federal lawmaker and human rights activist, Senator Shehu Sani. He will be speaking to us about the situation, especially in the north, especially in the northwest, most importantly, Kaduna. Good morning, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So in the last 24 to 48 hours, we've seen protests in the north take a different dimension. Some have said that this is no more about bad governance. Protest is more about a regime change. Some of the CDS has described it as treason, especially because of the hoisting of the Russian flag. In your view, what's going on in Kaduna right now, and what do you make of all that's happened in the last 48 hours?
Thank you very much. Well, the protest that took place in northern part of Nigeria differs in every form with the one that is taking place in southern part of Nigeria. Even though the title is End Bad Governance, but what we have seen in the north is not peaceful protest, but people called out to protest without any form of leadership, and it degenerated into violence. What you have seen in Kano is what happened in Jigawa, what happened in Yobe State, and also our experience in Kaduna State. In other states in the south, you can see leaders of protest identifying themselves and leading their other protesters. But in the case of the north, young people and women were called out to protest. And those who called them out to protest refused to make themselves available as leaders of those protests. And then this crowd started attacking public infrastructure, looting private businesses, snatching phones, and molesting passerby and seizing their motorcycles. So for us in the north, it's not a peaceful protest. Those who call this protest, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, hide themselves, and then we all end up where we are. You can see Russian flags being shared. It happened in Kano and then later in Kaduna State. Well, 2 nights before that protest, money was shared, everyone knows it in Kaduna State, to most of these protesters, and then flags were distributed. I share the belief that people have the right to protest as an activist, and I also believe that those who are protesting against high cost of living are right. And I believe that peaceful protest is a democratic right. And those who are out to protest have the right to do it. And I believe that people should protest peacefully.
Yeah.
But what we have seen here in our state is simply violence, and this is the result of it.
Right.
So we saw a police armor tank also hijacked yesterday. Has this become totally overwhelming of our security agencies? Is it totally unabateable, or is there hope of things improving?
I beg your pardon?
We saw a police armor tank seized yesterday up north, and we saw all the protesters, so-called allegedly, on the armor tank. Can we arrest this situation up north right now? Is it something that can be arrested, or is it insurmountable?
Well, what you have seen in as the case of the police armored vehicle being seized, I think the police were exercised restraint, because the alternative of stopping the seizure of that armored vehicle is to fire on protesters and kill as many people. But I think the police now took the wisdom of allowing the vehicles to be taken over, and later they took control. But what we have seen yesterday was different from what happened in the first and second day of the protest. And this is what happens when protests are called without leaders making themselves visible. Banks were attacked, government offices were attacked, people themselves who are simply in their houses were also attacked by these protesters. So I think if this continues, the whole essence of the protest and the value of it is lost. Because if it is about high cost of living, if it's about economic hardship, at least you should raise Nigerian flags or symbolically or with creativity, raise empty plates and pots. But the Russian flag shows that those who are promoting, encouraging and funding the protests in the north has other ulterior motives, which was simply instigating military coup, anarchy, violence, lawlessness and disorder. This is what we have in north. And one of the reasons why we caution those who call for this protest, especially in the north, is that there should be a leadership that will drive the process. When you have leaders in the forefront of the struggle, they will guide the crowd, telling them that we are moving from point A to point B, and the protest starts from 8 a.m. and ends by 4 p.m. But all these things are not available. They simply unleashed a monster, and now we are bearing the consequences in our state. And the protest was never a peaceful one.
Okay, so for me, I sort of really worry. I worry because it seemed like the states involved have the political actors seemingly complicit because there isn't a strong enough message to stop the ongoing riot, because it's no longer a protest, it's vandalism, it is riot, it's when you hold a flag, obviously somebody brought the flag out. So is it that we are having a politically motivated crisis in the north?
Well, there are about 6 factors that lead to peaceful protests transforming into violence. And I can set them. The first factor is when the security apparatus of the states use live bullets against peaceful protesters. That can degenerate into violence. Secondly is when protest leaders have no control of their own followers. That can degenerate to violence. The third is when thugs infiltrate protesters, you will have violence. The fourth aspect is when sponsored thugs are set against peaceful protesters, you will have violence. The fifth aspect is when you have people with ulterior motives other than the issue of high cost of living, you will have violence. The sixth aspect of it is that when protest is not organic, is funded to achieve a certain purpose, then it was not for what was publicly advertised. There are ulterior or hidden agenda behind such protests. So the protests in Abuja and the southern part of Nigeria was peaceful, but that of the north was actually violent. And I don't blame anyone other than the organizers for not being in the forefront to protect their protesters and also to direct them on what to do. Okay. And I think it's important that protests like this must have a direction and also must have rules. This is not our first experience in protest. ASU has been protesting, Labour has been protesting, NANS have protesting. Protests should have rules of engagement. You protest for 3 days, you call it off, and then you raise a team to dialogue. And then among the demands, if it's 10, you may achieve 5, and then you set a date. If the other 5 are not achieved, we are going to return back to the street in October or November. But what we have here is simply calling out young people and women to the street and setting them against an armed apparatus and then unleashing them against other persons.
Right, okay.
Billions of naira was lost, lives were lost, and then this is, what can we say is the benefit of what has happened in northern part of Nigeria?
Okay.
Okay, so this pains me a lot because I am a northerner, right? And we're supposed to be prepared for this because this is not the first time this kind of thing is happening. in fact, the North cannot afford to have protests right now. The protests, they've been saying this thing that there's going to be protest. Our governors are supposed to have been ready, because we know that especially in Kaduna, we have those places, we call them red flags. We know that those places, we have, will I say, yes, thugs, or will I call them thugs or something that will cause mayhem to Kaduna. We know it. I can remember the last time there was riots in Kaduna in 2000. I think in 2000, back then in 2000, it was terrible. It was terrible. So right now in the North, we have bandits, we have Boko Haram, we have different things, disturbing the North. We can't afford this kind of riot right now. So I want to ask you, what have the governor or the state police, or what will I say, what have they done so far? They're supposed to have been armed and waiting, because it's a normal thing when something like this happens. So what have they done so far? And none of them, they've not even come out to say anything or done anything about it.
Well, first of all, Nigerians have the right to protest. We are a democratic country, and our constitution and the laws of our country guarantees us the right to protest, but to protest peacefully. The responsibility of governors is to make sure that the issues that are raised and that spark of protests are being addressed. And from what we have seen, billions of naira was shared to the governors, and also trucks of rice was shared to the governors. And there could have been a serious engagement with the civil society and the general public before the commencement of the protest. But I don't know how that was done. But in Kaduna State, significant effort was made by the governor of the state, taking cognizance of our history. Kaduna is almost evenly divided between Muslims and Christians. We have a river in the center of the city. The southern part of the river is predominantly Christians, and the northern part is predominantly Muslim. But if you look at what the protest that has happened, it's mostly in the northern part of the river, and we thank God for that. Because if there was no intervention and action taken by the governor of the state to reach out to many persons and also communities there, it could have been worse. So for us, at least whatever has happened could have been worse if there was no engagement. So it is the responsibility of people holding political position in the federal government and also those in the states to have averted this protest. But I believe that many of them did their best. Right. But the organizers of the protest were determined, and this was the result that came out of it.
All right, let me ask you, as regards the presidency on this, because we've seen how Keir Starmer came out very firmly to say, and emphatically, that they'll be clamping down on the rioters in the UK that happened in the last 24 hours. So far, we have the CDS coming out saying that hoisting that flag was treason. But what stand or what role do you think the president himself should take? Should he also come out again to speak, or do you expect more leaders to come out against exactly what was done concerning hoisting that flag?
Well, I have had a lot of comments with regards to the flags. But the fact that the protest was about bad governance and the protest was about cost of living, and now you see Russian flags, means that there were ulterior motives behind the issue of cost of living as far as the North is concerned. Russian flags were basically raised in the North. So perhaps it's either that those who organize the protests or who are leading the protests in the North have other intention other than the issue of ending bad governance, or virtually the whole essence of the protests in the North was to instigate a military takeover or anarchy in the country. So the statement from the Chief of Defense Staff and also those from the side of the government on the matter is what is needed now, for them to know that you should raise Nigerian flag. You can be creative in but raising erosion flag does not make any sense. People say they want to take back their country, and then they are raising erosion flag. So what does that mean?
Right.
So I believe that the action taken is
right.
in the best interest of this country. We are not going to be a Russian colony or any colony of any country anymore.
Okay, sir, when we saw the protest start, you know, what we are seeing in Kaduna is not different from what, if not worse, than what we saw in Kano, what we saw in Borno, what we saw in other northern states. Have the Northern Governors Forum, you know, at least they have that, are they, you know, in consensus taking a stand against this?
Well, the problem of North did not start in the last 1.5 years or the last 12 months. The issue of poverty, underdevelopment, illiteracy in northern part of Nigeria was as a result of decades of systemic neglect, exploitation, plunder, and abandonment by the political ruling elites from our own part of the country. Many people who had the opportunity to preside over the affairs of the country from the northern part were not able to, they failed to address the problems of underdevelopment, of hunger, of poverty in the north. So the president now has inherited the people that have been neglected, exploited, plundered, and abandoned for decades. And what you see here is an explosion. After all, the insecurity in northern part of Nigeria is not imported. The bandits and the terrorists are not people from Niger or Algeria or Morocco. These are people from the north. We are from the same ethnic group. Mostly we are from the same religion. And they were people that were neglected, abandoned, and they took up arms now into to acts of crime. So if we have anybody to blame, we can't blame those in the saddle of leadership today because they have the levers of power to address issues. But we should mostly blame our own leaders who have been in power for the last 4 decades, who refuse or fail to address these developmental and human development issues that could have raised standard of living, educate our people, and address the problems of underdevelopment in our own region. The young people you see, the women you see on the street, were a product of a system that has failed, a leadership that has failed, and mostly those leaders are from our own part of the country. These are the bitter truth we don't want to tell ourselves, and we're trying to find a scapegoat in someone. And the earlier we do that, the better. Kaduna, Kano, and Jos are the most industrialized part of northern Nigeria. 80% of the industries in those areas, those parts of the country, are dead. So who do we blame? And they were not dead in the last 12 months. They have been left to die in the last 20, 30, 40 years. Up to today in the north, our farmers are still planting their crops with their foot. So who do we blame for this? Today in the north, most of the diseases that have since disappeared in other parts of the world are all here in our own part of the country. Leprosy, glaucoma, polio, because some people simply felt that each time there's an immunization process, there is an immunization program, they use religion to make sure that they scare people from having access to these facilities and care. So there are issues that are our own that we have to solve, and there are issues that those in the position of power
Senator
should
Shehu,
address.
I don't think you've answered the question concerning. I don't think you've answered the question concerning the voice of the northern leaders. We know the issues in the north. We understand the genesis and how long it's been. We're saying, shouldn't there be a voice, either the NGF, the Northern Governors Forum, or either all the leaders in the north have one voice against what is happening currently? Because it's like the CDS, the Chief of Defense has said his own, but we need to hear a leader from the north vehemently, emphatically speak against what is going on. And we've not heard that, so we want to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, northern leaders have kept quiet for the last, since 2015. Because under Buhari regime, or under Buhari administration, many people in the North kept quiet or remained silent on the issue of governance, on the specter of ethnic, religious, and sectional solidarity. And today, many are finding their voice for the opposite reasons. Now, northern governors are those with the levers of power to now sit down and address the problem. If not them, I don't think much, because it's either you support the protesters now, or you will be told that you have been sponsored or you have been paid. Many religious leaders cautioned on the protests in the North, and the views that went out to the public was that they were being bribed to work against the protests. And now this is the result of it. So with what has happened in North today, northern governors have a duty to sit down and address the problems of the region and present the problem of the region before the president so that these issues can at least be addressed. Okay. We are the ones that are at the helm in Ministry of Education. We are the ones that are at the helm in Ministry of Agriculture. We are the ones that are helm in some sections of the security forces of the country. So the North still has the ability and the capacity to address this problem if it can utilize the opportunity that is at hand today, right, when it couldn't do it from 2015 to 2023. Okay.
Okay, sir. So you and I, we know that right now in the North, we can't afford protests because of what the North has been going through and all. So I want to ask, other than protest or coming out to protest on the streets, how else can we get our governors or local governments or all the other ones, how do we get them to listen to us and do something for us other than protest?
Well, the only way now is to come back home and probe ourselves and direct our anger and our demands to those who are holding political positions and power, and those in whose custody the resources of the country is before them. We should hold the governors accountable. We should hold the local government chairmen accountable, because at no time in the history of this country
has
the subnationals, the state, and the local government level be given such humongous amount of money. And the North must set its priorities, which is poverty. They must invest their money in agriculture, invest in education, so that at least we can get these young people out of the street and into productive activity. The northern governors must sit down and address the problems of poverty and issues of insecurity and developmental issues in northern part of Nigeria. Okay. Now that they have more money than at any other time in the history of our country.
Okay, so my question, I know that you've already sort of answered a part of this question in that the reason we are not hearing the sound of northern leaders is because if they say anything, they'll be seen as they have they've been paid. But here's another thing. The people on the streets in Kaduna, in Kano, across the northern states where the crises have happened, didn't just appear on the streets today. They have places where they were sleeping before for the past 2-3 years. I am sure that within the security apparatus and the leaders who want peace in the states, they know the people that they can talk to that will calm the nerves of those boys and young people on the streets. Are the people really willing to calm what is going down? Or are they okay with the way things are heating up within the states? And can the security apparatus deal with the ringleaders that can easily be identified since they've been there since? They didn't just import those boys today. They didn't just show up. Those are margeries, those boys, people that are protesting, that are demolishing things and burning up things. They've been there for years. Somebody gave them those flags, and those people are known. They're in the system.
Well, the issue of poverty and underdevelopment in the North, like I've said earlier, did not start today. If you can remember, during the time of Buhari's government, the poverty level in Nigeria raised to the point that we had over 135 million people who are said to live below the poverty line, and almost 70% of them are from northern part of Nigeria. But poverty is not an excuse to violence. It's also not an excuse to terrorism. The people of the north are not poorer than the people of Niger, are not poorer people of Benin Republic. They are not also poorer than people of Chad and northern part of Cameroon. Why the violence in our place? Those at the helm of leadership over the years refuse to address these fundamental issues, and now we are living the truth of our failure. We are here today because of what we refused to do yesterday or what we did wrongly yesterday. So it is now for us to look forward, and the only way to look forward is that those in charge of the leadership in the north, the governors specifically, because they are the ones, must take this issue very seriously, learn from this violence and attack it not just by sending police against protesters and police against poor people and killing poor people, but address the problems of poverty in the region, and then everyone can live in peace.
Sir, please.
The poverty in northern part of Nigeria is not only a threat to the north, but it's a threat to the peace of the whole country.
So please, I want to ask you,
look
sir,
at what we are suffering today.
How do you think the leaders within the north can address this issue without sending security, using the security apparatus to curb them? What would be your top 3 or top 5 short-term intervention to bring a bit of calmness to the north and resume economic activities within the north?
Well, first of all, I must restate it very clearly. The police or the army killing young people and women in the street in the north will not address the problem.
I agree.
It may do it temporarily by pushing people back into their homes. But the permanent solution to the problem is that northern leaders should meet in Kaduna, which is the headquarters of the north. Come out with a template of what they need to do to address the issues. First of all, what can they do to address the problems of insecurity? Most of the people who are holding security positions in Nigeria today are still from northern part of Nigeria. Security is one. Secondly is the issue of education. Most public schools in the north have been destroyed over the years, and partly as a result of insecurity or partly as a result of lack of motivation for people to bring their kids to school. Third is the issue of agriculture. The north is the most blessed part of Nigeria. In land mass, we cover about 70%. In population, we all have the numbers. We all have the resources that are natural resources that are all needed to develop the region. So we can't be waiting from manna from heaven. It is us that will address ourselves. And look at what is happening in northern part of Nigeria. Abuja is basically located in the north. But if you look at the businesses, almost 70% of the businesses, private businesses, are people from southern part of Nigeria. So the economy is not just a reason why people are poor, because even if the economy is good, if you don't have a product to sell and you don't have a service to offer, you will still remain a poor man. So it is for the governors of the north to sit down, prioritize on the problems of the region, and use the resources allocated to them to address it. If not, nobody is going to live in peace. We will still be moving from interval of war to another phase of war, and that will not be in the best interest of the country.
All right, let me go on.